So I recently had a couple of friends ask me about breaking into software. Most people are trying to get developer jobs at fast-paced consumer and internet companies. And I figured it'd be easier to put together this video to explain the best ways to do it. Now, most of these friends are interested in the awesome work-life balance, the delicious food, the awesome people you get to work with, and it definitely doesn't hurt that the salaries and compensation for most of these companies is second to none. Additionally, growth opportunities are crazy. There's a lot of material out there already, but most of it is geared towards people who have already gotten their first job. If you've never worked in software before, breaking in is one of the hardest things that you'll ever accomplish. And here's some tips that have helped me in the past and might help you. So first things first, you don't need to know how to code. A lot of people forget that software companies are not just software engineers cranking away all day. There's tons of marketing people, there's salespeople, of course, founders, designers, writers. So when you're trying to break in, you might need to cater your experience and craft a bit towards software engineering. For example, let's say you're a writer and you want to break into software, you might go into SEO or digital marketing. But there's always room for existing talents. But if you're definitely sure that you want to pursue software engineering, tip number one, first gig is always the hardest. New entrants into the job market, it's pretty intense. Everything is geared for senior developers. With the job market being so hot for senior candidates, they usually have their say on where they want to go and what they want to do. Obviously, this isn't true for your first jobs though. Just keep in mind there's going to be some initial pain and it could take a while. But one great part of the industry that's awesome is how quickly you level up. It might take you a year, 2 years to get your first software engineering job or your first job within software, but it'll be much easier down the road to get promoted if you really try hard. But let's say you don't have any experience at all. How can you get in? Well, if you're a university student, you probably have access to your university's recruiting office. There's people whose whole job is to get you technical and behavioral interviews at companies to get internships. And a lot of these internships end up being return offers for full-time positions. However, if you were in that position, you probably wouldn't be watching this video. The second thing you could do is, a lot of people forget how easy it is to just build something from scratch and start talking about it. So if you can create a front end, talk to a back end, tweak the performance a little bit, you're already doing the software engineering for an entire team. The other benefit people don't realize about personal projects is that despite the fact that you don't have your code reviewed by others, you end up learning a ton about maintainable patterns and habits in engineering. And that's because you need to do the maintenance of the code. You're the only one to work on it and you're the only one to maintain it. So if you write spaghetti code and write quick and dirty code, you will understand why it's important to have good naming, separation of concerns, good modularization. It's because you have to end up maintaining it. And the great thing is you can add these projects under your resume as experience, especially if you're able to generate revenue from it. Another way is via contracting work. Visit temp agencies and freelance websites. A lot of the clientele that they have care less about your resume and more about your portfolio. Additionally, it's really good income until you land a full-time job. You might have to charge a little less when you first start in, but it's not rare to hear of a client hiring a consultant via temp to perm roles, especially if you really demonstrate that you're providing a return on their investment. If you've been building stuff for yourself, it may be enough to snag a contracting gig that you can then put on your resume. So many people are drawn to the variety of full-time consulting or contracting offers and make their entire career out of this. Another thing you can do is contribute to open source. Another really underrated way is getting contributions through open source, and you get the integration of being on a software engineering team and get to have valuable technical experience to trade up, but you also get to work on something that others generally use, including yourself. And it's definitely not unheard of for strong open source software contributors to be recruited by another company. For example, the author of Redux, Dan Abramov. You gotta also put yourself out there and meet people. I used to be of the opinion that heads down work would always speak for itself, but much like a good SaaS product needs to focus just as much on marketing and sales as on the product itself, a new technologist needs to make sure that their work is constantly getting recognized and heard about. So on the job front, this means asking people for informational coffees and referrals, building a portfolio, asking for feedback, and tracking down every lead and opportunity to show off your unique talents. Conferences and meetups are great for meeting others who are really interested in the same things you are. And they often lead to opportunities if you're a presenter or if you just strike up the right conversation. It's also really important to go into a domain that you're really interested in. Tech companies with different values and different cultures are good for different people. A fintech firm and an ad agency that is technically driven are not the same place to be as a software engineer. There's different dress codes, there's different experiences. Working at Jane Street might be completely different than Etsy. So you want to look for something that's aligned to your personality and interests domain-wise. You may hate marketing. If so, don't go into ad tech. Also, you want to parlay your previous experience. If you think about it, a large part of the job of a developer is to translate business requirements into code logic. So if you know math, biology, science, law, any of these fields, and you can translate the requirements into programming, you're golden. So if you're coming from finance, look into fintech. If you used to make music, you might want to look into Spotify or Pandora, and you can talk about how you built that awesome music collection app in your spare time. Or at the very least, you'll be able to connect to the product more. And keep in mind, it could take a very long time. A lot of friends are shocked at how long it takes to succeed and become a software engineer and get their first developer job. There is an element of luck involved, as with anything. In today's job climate, provided you keep improving your resume, it could take anywhere from 1 to 6 months to land a job, or 6 months to 2 years or 3 years to land a job. But if you've built up your resume with personal projects, open source projects, etc., and it takes longer than 6 months, you should really try to identify what the biggest blocker might be, because the market is generally good enough that you shouldn't have any issues. It does take a while to get to the more senior roles. Typically, it takes 3 to 5 years of working as a programmer to understand and start thinking about the architecture of software. At least that's what I've seen anecdotally. And lastly, just always be learning. One last thing that you learn as soon as you become a software engineer is that the industry takes a while to adapt to. What you'll find is that trends come up hard and fast, but a lot of them don't stick. If you're a developer, you want to focus on the core data structures like lists, stacks, graphs, etc., and the most common algorithm patterns and OOP patterns, because they've been around forever and they'll probably still be as useful 10, 20, 30 years from now. Because your second software engineering job will be less about does this person have experience and more about what does this person bring to the table with their experience. With all that said, although software technology is getting a lot of buzz at the moment, there's so many industries and professions that are just as enjoyable and meaningful to be in. Hopefully this video helps someone break in this year, because being a developer has changed my life and it's an awesome blessing, and I encourage everyone to try it out and see if they like it.